Hello, welcome to this presentation about IB English A Language and Literature, or English A Literature, the Paper 2, which is one of your two final examinations in the course. So this presentation is a brief overview of what's involved in Paper 2, what you need to do in terms of key skills and planning, and then in a few other videos I'll go through some specific exam questions and take them apart. Okay, so to begin with, you can see on the screen these are the three texts that I use for Paper 2 at the moment. If you're doing higher level, you choose three texts. So we used one work in translation, which is Gabriel García Márquez's Chronicle of a Death Foretold, and then two other texts, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, and Joseph Conrad's novella, Heart of Darkness. So those are the texts I'll be talking about mainly. As you can see here, this is based on part 3 of the course. Higher level, as I said, uses three texts, and the exam time is 2 hours. Standard level only have two texts to look at, and the exam time is 1 hour, 30 minutes. And overall, this is worth 25% of your total score, so it's the joint biggest score for a single assessment. I would say also, arguably, I think it's probably the toughest assessment, so it's worth really preparing for. Okay, so how it works is the same for standard or higher level. You get a choice of 6 questions, only 6 questions, and you choose one question, and you write your answer based purely on that. You have to talk about 2 of the texts that you've studied. The marking scheme is different, but the questions are the same for standard and higher. Okay, 2 big things that you need to really know well to do Paper 2 well. Ideally, you need to know the texts in very great detail. It's not just a matter of the plot and why the author wrote it. You need to look at the context of composition, which means basically background. What was happening at the time the text was written? What was the response to it? What was the writer thinking? What was the social setting? What was happening? And then equally, the reader response theory, which looks at basically what did the readers at the time think, and has the meaning of that text changed because of different readers being in different situations? Heart of Darkness, for example, was received very differently when it was first written compared with how we see it today, even though the words are exactly the same. So thinking about how readers respond to text is also really, really important. Those are the 2 really big things you need to think about. Okay, so let's dive in with a few of the sample questions. These are sample questions that IB have given schools. So you might want to pause this presentation just to have a quick look at these. You can see the questions are fairly complex in the way they're presented, but also quite general because obviously there's only 6 and these have to apply to hundreds and hundreds of different texts. So here are a few more. And hopefully you can see by reading this they focus on very different types of aspects of literature. And this is one thing that's worth looking at when you first get a question. Think about what kind of question it is, because generally there's only really 5 or 6 types of question. They're just rephrased and rebooted every year. So we talk about not so much categories, but lenses, looking at answers through or questions through different lenses. And so these are, I would say, these are the main 5. You could argue there might be a couple more, but these ones will come up on your exam, there's no doubt about it. And so if you've written at least one answer for each of these, you'll be in fairly good shape. So the first one focuses on the text in particular. Might be stylistic features such as imagery or symbolism. Very often there's a question about narrative and the way the story is told. Is it chronological? Is it framed? Is the narrator unreliable, as in The Great Gatsby? Things like that, very much focused on the text. Political lenses look at the situation around the text. What was happening at the time? Is the writer trying to make a point or a social message? Very often they are. Thematic obviously relates to themes, as the loss of honour or the importance of pride or things like this. Reception theory or reader reception theory focuses on, as I just said, the way readers receive the text and how that changes over time. And then the context type questions essentially is like I said, the context of composition earlier. It's what's happening at that particular time when the text was written, what other events were going on, what inspired the text, what's the message behind the text, those sort of things. So generally, as I say, there are 5 main lenses that you can look through. So when you get your question, it's worth pausing and thinking about what it is. It would be a good exercise to pause this presentation, go back to those questions and label them according to one of those 5 lenses. Okay, so in terms of marking, this is basically how it's broken down. It's out of 25. Each category or criterion is 5 marks. Criterion A is how well do you understand the text. B is do you specifically respond to the question. It's an important one. Don't just try and go in with pre-rehearsed answers. That never really works very well. Criterion C, the use of stylistic features. Detail, how well do you know the text in precise detail? Can you pick out quotes, examples, incidents in the text that are important? D is your organization and development of the essay. And E is the language that you use. How precise, how formal, how detailed is it? Okay, so let's move on to the beginning of the exam. You'll get 5 minutes reading time before the 2 hours or 1 hour 30 begins. Those are really golden 5 minutes. You need to sit down, think very carefully. Those 6 questions, which is the one? The way I like to do it is to just simply cross out the questions that really suck and really you don't want to do. And usually there's 1 or 2 that are just very, very difficult or just don't fit your text. And so get rid of them, cross them out, focus on maybe the 1 or 2 or 3 questions that you think are okay. Think about, can I use both my texts for that question? Think about, are there any words in this question I'm not sure about? Do I understand the question properly? If you don't understand the question, move on. And hopefully by the end of 5 minutes, you've got a question that fits both texts, you understand, and you're starting to shape an answer in your head. Okay, second thing, as I said, the questions are quite complex. They're asking you to analyze on various levels. So first job to do is to take the question apart, break it down, think about what is it actually asking, which of those lenses am I being asked about here? Can I make the question simpler without changing the meaning of the question? So let's look at an example here. How does a particular term or concept, such as childhood, change in the way it's represented in the text you've studied? So keywords, think about the keywords, even underline them. In an exam you're nervous, make sure you focus. So this particular question, let's have a look. I think those are the keywords, concept, and the way it changes over time, the way it's represented. That's it. Such as childhood doesn't mean I'm limited to childhood. It's just in brackets, so it's a suggestion. I can change that. So once we've underlined the question, let's unpack it. Let's put it in easy English, so we're not confused. We know exactly what our focus is. So I think this works quite well. How does a concept change in the way it's shown in my texts? And for this, we're going to take the concept of honor. Okay, so now suddenly it's a much more manageable, bite-size question. So if I look at honor, I'm going to brainstorm a little bit before I begin my answer. I want to first of all define what honor is, because it's the key term in my essay. I want to have a brief outline of the authors and why honor is important to them, if I know that. And then some examples, lots of examples of how the writers show honor. How is it culturally important? And also, don't forget the word change, how and why it changes, if it does change in your essay. Start thinking about that. And at this stage, we're just brainstorming. We're throwing ideas out there. We're gathering ideas. Later on, we're going to farm them and harvest them and put them into some sort of logical order. For now, I want to focus my ideas on honor. Once we've done that, and we'll talk about this more in other videos, once you've done your brainstorming, you want to start thinking about how you can put these into separate ideas. And eventually we'll come up with a plan like this. We'll have an intro, which will have a thesis statement and some signposting. We'll talk about that later. And then try and break your ideas into key points. So here I've got 3 key points. I'm going to talk about both texts when I make my first point, and then both texts when I make the second point, and so on. I'm not going to go all about text 1 and then all about text 2. It's much better to have this kind of approach. Okay, and then think about how you're going to answer the question. Sum it up in a sentence or two. Your thesis statement is essentially answering the question without just repeating it in a bland, vague kind of way. So you can see on the screen here, this is my thesis statement. The writers use honor to represent the flaws within specific cultures and show how that can lead to tragedy. Okay, so then to sum up, then the first key stage is to paper 2. Choose the right question. Unpack the question. Brainstorm, really go through what you know about the question and the terms. Start to make a structure for your essay, your key points. What are they? Start to think of a thesis statement, like specifically how are you going to answer that question. Once you're at that stage, that's the end of your planning. The next part 6 is the bulk of the time you're going to be in the exam. You want to plan probably for 20 to 30 minutes, and then if you're doing higher level, and then write for about an hour and a half. Write your answer, and then make sure you leave about 10 minutes at the end so you can read over your text. So you know the organization is good. There's no silly mistakes. There's good transitions, all that kind of thing. Okay, thank you.